We're back and ready to discuss the fun yet complex world of budgeting. It's fun because this is where you get to really design the nuts and bolts of how your grant gets money for really doing your research. But it's complex because we're researchers, not budget specialists. But worry not, the most important piece of information I have for you here is this. Your campus budget team can and will help when you get to the level of submitting a grant to a sponsor, so you will have the help of a professional. Okay, so remember, you made a detailed project plan that had your stages of research and the components of each stage, including people, stuff, and other costs. So that's the basis for the budget. If it's not in your plan, you don't put it in your budget. Only the necessary and reasonable expenses should go into the budget. So if it's not needed in the project plan, you won't be including it. People get all sorts of strange ideas about free money with grants, but that's not realistic. You can't penalize your sponsor. In other words, you can't charge anything more than you'd get from your institution. So you can't add extra salary bonuses, you can't buy things that aren't approved by the organization, etc. 9-month employees can get summer pay, but it still has to be at the same rate they would normally get paid. No bonuses or extra pay, and no unneeded supplies, no swanky parties, alright? There are various things that you can't spend funds on, and those are discussed in or linked to your application guidelines. Now, budgets break down into categories of expenses. Foundations and nonprofits are less particular about these categories than the government is, but they will often accept a government-style set of budget categories. If they won't, their application will make that clear and give you guidance on how to break out the categories of your budget. But otherwise, your university will have templates that follow the basic government categories to help you with your budget. If they're not on their website, you should contact your budget office. But I'll also show some examples. The categories of direct costs, or costs charged in direct support of your project, are personnel costs, equipment costs, travel, participant support, and other. As you can guess, other covers a lot of ground, including supplies, dissemination, consultants, subawards, and anything else that isn't in one of the other categories. Out of those, personnel costs include salaries and fringe benefits. Each campus has its own percentage rate for how much fringe benefits like insurance and social security costs, so you'll need to find that for your own campus. Equipment costs specifically are for large durable equipment like a flow cytometer, over $5,000. Smaller consumable stuff ranging from Petri dishes to Raspberry Pi computers to sensor components, all of that is considered supplies and materials and falls in the other category. Travel, I think, is sort of self-explanatory, but remember that it has to relate to the project, like travel to research sites or travel for dissemination of results. Participant support is for either participants in a study or for participants in a symposium if you're the symposium host on the grant. Your own participation for dissemination is travel or other. Speaking of other, that covers everything else, which is a lot. I mentioned supplies and material, anything that runs out, even if it runs out in a few years, like a PC. Be careful with PCs, though, because your usual office PC is generally considered part of your regular work and is not allowed on grant budgets. Special PCs might be with a good justification to explain it, and we'll get to justifications in a moment. Other things that might be in other would be page fees for journal publishing, consultant costs, subawards if you need another campus or site to help with part of your research. Like maybe someone that's an expert in the field could be a co-PI and they're at another campus, so they'll do part of the project there. Basically anything else not covered in the other 4 categories. A basic budget form the NSF provides for one of their programs looks like this. It looks simple, right? Yeah, I know, but that's only the simplest way to look at it. You see these categories here. Here is a detailed form from UNC Chapel Hill's research folks. This is more than you probably need. Lots of lines with categories and subcategories. Now, honestly, you won't be working with all of these, but they want to give all of the possibilities. One thing you want to look at here is this section where they have the baseline information for their institution, UNC's rates for things. These are things you may need to know from your university too, although they do say to check the website for the current rates. The F&A or indirect rate is here. And that's a percentage you apply to your direct costs to cover the indirect costs that let you function. That's what keeps the rent on your building paid, the lights and heat running, the plumbers and janitors that clean up after you, the human resources people that help you hire your personnel, all of the necessary stuff to keep you running, but that can't be directly tied item by item to your project. That's the indirect or F&A costs. Someone counts those up every few years and makes a rate with federal approval. If there's not a limit specified in the solicitation, then this, or your campus's version of this, is the rate you put in for F&A on those costs that are subject to it. Equipment and a few other things don't get that F&A or indirect rate applied to them. Look at your sponsor guidelines or consult a budget officer for these fine details. A nice spreadsheet like this one might also help guide you through it. And let me touch on something down on line 54. Oop, too far. Cost sharing. And that's when your department pays, or your organization pays, part of the cost of the project. Foundations love it. Government agencies usually dislike it. Foundations see it as a symbol of commitment to support the project, while the government is more of the view that if you have money to share costs, you don't need their money as much. They're just different viewpoints. So be sure you've checked your solicitation and found out if you need cost sharing or not. Back to the slides now. Once you have a budget, you write a budget justification, because all that spreadsheet stuff doesn't really help people understand the costs. You have to explain them. You listed their roles in your detailed plan, but this is where you can give more on them. It gives you some more pages to work with in making your needs and rationale for what those needs are, making those clear. So this is a chance to explain your detailed plan relationships. Explain them in a way that helps support them. Don't just repeat what was in your detailed plan. Explain stuff. Yeah, I just repeated that a lot, didn't I? That's important. Why do you want those undergraduate researchers? Will they be helping broadening participation goals? Or why do you want participant support for 200 participants? Maybe that will support your specific aims? Make sure the connection is clear. Some reviewers even start with the budget and justification, not the narrative. So you want this to really clarify the components and their costs. Okay, so that's the basics of budgeting. This is an area where you want to talk to a professional, and they want to talk to you. There are dedicated budget people on your campus that keep up with the rules and procedures for this. Talk to them. Get help if you do a real grant. And if you're just going through this course for your own information, consider getting a group together and asking for an appointment to get a little training. Respect their time, because budget people are very, very busy. But they're also a great source of expertise and support. They can clarify and fix a lot of questions much faster than we as researchers can. And that's it for the basics. Thank you for listening. This is Nina, and this has been Module 9, Budget Basics for the UNC Systems Professional Science Master's Course on the Fundamentals of Grantsmanship.